The rhetoric against anti-vaxxers is becoming downright scary, and I really think it's worth actually taking a moment to look at what they're saying about anti-vaxxers, which is going to inform, this is to be the reasons for why they're going to start persecuting them. In some places they already are. And so I think it's just worth looking at a few of these cases. For example, you have the example of Novak Djokovic, or Djokovic. There we go. I'm not foreign or a tennis enjoyer, who was deported from Australia on the grounds that he was apparently an anti-vaxxer because he was not vaccinated and didn't want to disclose his vaccine status. But the reason that they gave is mad, right? So it was the public. It was inferred that the public would view his attitude as unwilling to be vaccinated, and this would negatively impact public health in Australia.
How?
Because it would inspire others to say, well, I don't want to be vaccinated too, because he's an influential person, apparently, and therefore these people wouldn't be vaccinated. Now, Australia has draconian laws and regulations about vaccinations. They've gone into multiple lockdowns, and I mean, I think it's a huge number of Australians who have been vaccinated, and they've been talking in very concerning ways about it. But this is the mindset, the idea that for some reason, him not having the vaccine is going to impact public health is wild. And it was recently revealed as well that he has an 80% stake in a company that's developing a COVID drug.
That's interesting.
But not a vaccine. This is a treatment, not a vaccine. And so perhaps that has something to do with it. But we talked about this in a premium podcast that we did that we can't put on YouTube, of course, because there were a bunch of sports stars just dropping on the pitches. And there's been literally hundreds of them now. You can go sign up to lotus.com if you'd like to learn more about that. Let's move on quickly before the YouTube algorithm decides we've gone too close to the sun. Anyway, Austria is going mad against anti-vaxxers. And again, anti-vaxxers is just a default phrase now that's being used for people who have not had the vaccine. It also has been redefined to mean people who are against vaccine mandates, which is very 1984. But Austria is going to impose a whopping fine of €3,600 on people who flout a coronavirus vaccine mandate that it aims to introduce in February for residents of 14 or over. So if you're over 14 years old, you have to be vaccinated or you're going to get fined. Right? The health minister, Wolfgang Merkstein, said that there will be exemptions for pregnant women, although he stressed that vaccinations are recommended for them too. Well, then why are there exemptions for pregnant women? What would be the point? I can't speak any more on that on YouTube. He says, we still have an obligation and need to increase vaccination coverage so that we don't go from lockdown to lockdown next year as well, says one of the cabinet ministers responsible for these issues. There are still well over 1 million Austrians who aren't vaccinated. That's too many. I say very clearly that we don't want to punish people who aren't vaccinated. We want to bring them along. We want to convince them of this vaccination, and we want them to show solidarity with everyone so we can regain our freedom.
By threatening them with a fine.
Threatening them with a fine. But it gets worse because they're also threatening them with lockdowns of the unvaccinated.
Oh my
Now,
God.
I believe they actually walked back this position. So it's not something that happened, but it's the fact that they're thinking like this that very much concerns me. So the Chancellor, Alexander Schallenberg, said that if cases continue to rise, he may be forced to issue anti-vaxxers with stay-at-home orders and ban them from certain venues.
So put them under house arrest.
Exactly, put them under house arrest because ICU patients if they reached 500 ICU patients, Austria is a very small country, 25% of the country's total ICU capacity, then they'd have to be forced to stay at home and prevented from entering various venues. And this was lauded by The Independent, a British newspaper. This was the right idea. Put the unvaccinated in lockdown, said Adolf Hitler. Sorry, Sean O'Grady. Sorry about that. And he says, as the provincial governor Thomas Stelzer put it, I don't see why 2/3 should lose their freedom because 1/3 is dithering. Well, the government doesn't have to lock everyone down. It could have just done nothing. But anyway, he says, I'm not quite sure why this relatively prosperous chunk of Europe displays such reluctance to take this basic public health precaution. Some say it's to do with the strength of the far-right Freedom Party, but there we are. Right, so if you don't want to get vaccinated, forcibly vaccinated by the government, you're a Nazi. If you don't want to be locked down and locked in your home because you're a Jew, you're a Nazi. is this guy's view. Unbelievable. He says he is quite right, and it was a warning to the rest of Europe of what can befall the nation if a vaccine program falters. Asking the unvaccinated to live in... asking the unvaccinated. Asking. They're not
Careful use of
asking.
language there.
They're using the state. They're using force. Asking the unvaccinated to limit their travel and contact with others is one of the extreme measures that may well have to be taken when health services start to collapse as winter draws in. And that's becoming increasingly possible across the continent. Hasn't happened, obviously. But again, okay, so your freedom, your liberty, your rights are contingent on the health service. The tyranny of the NHS is what we're looking at here. I can't stand it. Lockdown of the unvaccinated is hardly an attractive option, or in most respects, a fair one. Right. So you admit that this is unfair. You shouldn't be doing this to people. But it's just the kind of emergency measure that would become an option or be forced upon us if, ironically enough, the senseless anti-vaxxer propaganda gets the kind of hold in this country as it seems to in Austria and elsewhere. Like 90% of the people in this country have been vaccinated.
It's funny how he talks about them almost as if they're actively mobilising hegemony rather than those who actually may have some slight reservations as to why they're peddling this idea so hard.
Or, for example, people who have had COVID.
Quite.
What would be the point of being vaccinated against a disease you've had? Answer me that. Germany, of course, wants mandatory vaccination, and this is probably something the Germans will do because...
History.
Yeah, because history, yeah. Olaf Scholz, who is designated to replace Angela Merkel as the Chancellor, wants to see COVID vaccinations become mandatory possibly by the end of February. He said in interviews on Tuesday. He told tabloid newspaper Bild that the country's high infection rates warranted the move. He says, "You can't callously watch the situation as it is right now. If we had a higher vaccination rate, we would be in a different situation." Oh, would you? You wish, because one of the things they were complaining about us, 90% vaccination, Germany is about 70% vaccinated. We're 90% vaccinated, and Omicron just ripped through the country, and the government like, okay, we're not in control of this.
Yeah.
But he's still entertaining the fantasies that he is in control of this, which he's not. Germany is, getting like 60,000 new reported cases a day, which isn't very much considering we were getting like 130,000.
Yeah, the number of cases doesn't matter anyway.
Exactly. That's not the relevant statistic. But again, he has failed to understand that he's not in control of the thing, and he thinks that simply if everyone was vaccinated, then they wouldn't catch COVID. Not according to the CDC, if YouTube allows me to say it. The CDC director was on CNN and was just like, no, that doesn't work. Quote, "What they can't do anymore is prevent transmission. So if you're going to go home with someone who's not been vaccinated, somebody who can't get vaccinated, I suggest you wear a mask in a public setting because apparently masks prevent transmission." So literally openly saying the CDC director is saying, no, the vaccine doesn't prevent you getting it, right? And that's why the vaccinated are still arriving in hospitals. Bring us to the next one, John. This is the hospitalization rate among fully vaccinated people in America, as Anthony Fauci, if these people are authorities in any way, the American Center for Disease Control and Anthony Fauci, if they're in any way authorities on this, then I will cite them, right? As Fauci says here, what we're starting to see now is an uptick in hospitalizations among people who've been vaccinated but not boosted. There was an article that came out in The Guardian, I think it was, where they were like, nearly half of the people in hospital for coronavirus are unvaccinated. It's like, so, okay, another way of putting that is most people in hospital with coronavirus are vaccinated. That's another way of putting that.
Yes.
So as we can see, the vaccine doesn't guarantee that you won't be going to hospital, and it doesn't stop you from spreading the disease. So lockdowns of the unvaccinated and punishing them isn't going to stop the number of cases ripping through your country.
Hasn't Keir Starmer literally had it twice since he's been boosted?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
And loads of celebrities have got the same problem. Like AOC posted on her Instagram, "Oh, I've had my jabs, I've had my boost, and I've got COVID." Rough, I got COVID and I didn't get any vaccines. Anyway, so it carries on. Again, the attitude that's coming out of the public officials, I was going to say servants of the public, but the masters of the public at this point, is just unbelievable. And honestly, I'm getting echoes of Weimar Republic style rhetoric coming out here. Macron, of course, said that he wants to annoy France's unvaccinated to the bitter end. It's a bit ominous, isn't it?
That's a bit weird.
Bitter end. What bitter end are you envisaging for the unvaccinated in France, Mr. Macron? He says, "The unvaccinated, I really want to piss them off, and we will continue to do so to the bitter end. That's the strategy. When my freedom comes to threaten that of other people, I become irresponsible. An irresponsible person is no longer a citizen."
Let me neck.
Didn't Hitler say much the same thing about Jews?
I think he
That they
literally
weren't
said
German
that.
citizens?
Yes.
That
Well,
they...
he even went as far as saying they can't qualify as persons.
Yes. So, I mean, and Macron is basically saying the same thing. But this is the problem. When the state identifies a section of the body politic that is an inconvenience and needs to be eradicated, I don't really see any functional difference between the way Hitler thought about Jews and the way Macron's looking at these unvaccinated people. This is disgusting. The state should not be targeting segments of its own population for whatever the bitter end is meant to be. It's unbelievable. Like, I honestly, it's genuinely scary. Genuinely scary. Like, this is the leader of a major country saying things like this. Like his neighbor has been pissing on his lawn or something. No, he's talking about the life and the livelihoods of the people in his country that he's supposed to be responsible for. I find this amazing, right? So France's Prime Minister, Jean Castex, said, who outrages the nation? Who fractures the nation? Who drives the nursing staff in our casualty departments to make drastic ethical choices? Well, it's a tiny minority. To be citizens is also to have obligations. Who controls international finance? Who's ruining the German people? Oh, well, it's a tiny minority. Should we do something about them, Mr. Castex?
Yeah, the citizens don't have much of a say in that, do they?
No. Macron continued, I'm not going to put them in prison, yet, I suppose. I'm not going to forcibly vaccinate them, yet. But I love the way that he's leaving this on the table. Well, I could. I'm not going to, though. I could, could. Therefore, you have to say to them from January the 15th, which is, what, is that today?
I think it's...
No, it's 5 days ago, right? You can no longer go to a restaurant, you can no longer go for a drink, you can no longer go for a coffee, you can no longer go to the theatre, you can no longer go to the cinema. So you are ostracised from society.
Second-class citizens, if that.
Yep, and they're probably going to have to be wearing some sort of yellow star, so people know that they're not serving a vaccinated person by accident.
That's how it worked practically.
Yes, don't shop at unvaccinated businesses. And so, okay, well, what's this over? What's this madness of separating out the state targeting a segment of its own population for what is essentially an extermination and for ostracism? Well, figures from the end of December show that the number of people 20 or over with 3 vaccine jabs in intensive care was 4.82 per million of population. And among the unvaccinated, that was 182 per million, which sounds terrible. That's huge. That's mad. If everyone were vaccinated, there wouldn't be a health crisis, says the president of the Medical Commission. And that's, it sounds like there's a massive health crisis. France is a country with about 70 to 80 million people in it. How many people do you think are in intensive care with COVID-19? Tens of thousands, right? It's going to be hundreds of thousands. The health system is going to be creaking under the weight of it. 3,665.
3,365.
Yeah. That's why they have to be like, oh, well, it's 182 per million. Because it makes it sound really bad.
What on earth are they doing?
Right. This is a long way off of the peak during the first wave, where it was 7,000 people in intensive care, but approaching the 4,900 seen during the second wave. So it's twice been worse than this. And they're acting like having 3,600 people in intensive care is some sort of medical crisis. It's not.
As if it's never been worse.
It's mad. Thankfully, 100,000 Frenchmen took to the streets and were like, come on then, Macron, let's have it. You could say a lot about the French, but their spirit is still there. I do like it.
You got to like this part of being French.
Yeah, exactly. I like this part of being French. This turnout was 4 times higher than the numbers who came out in December when they first started introducing sort of draconian measures like this. And some of them were taking direct action. We can go to the next one, John.
Oh, brilliant.
Pelted with soil in the street, just saying.
Deserved.
Yeah. And so moving from France to French Canada, which is probably the worst of it, to be honest. If we can watch this clip of Justin Trudeau.
Oui, on va s'en sortir de cette pandémie par la vaccination. Puis on en connaît tous des gens qui sont en train d'hésiter un petit peu. On va continuer d'essayer de les convaincre. Mais il y a aussi des gens qui sont farouchement opposés à la vaccination.
Qui sont extrémistes.
Qui croient pas dans la science, qui sont souvent misogynes, souvent racistes aussi. C'est un petit groupe, mais qui prend de la place. Et là, il faut faire un choix en tant que leader, en tant que pays. Est-ce qu'on Est-ce qu'on tolère ces gens-là ou est-ce qu'on dit, ben voyons, la plupart des gens, presque 80% des Québécois ont fait ce qu'il fallait faire, se sont fait vacciner, on veut revenir aux choses qu'on aime faire. C'est pas ces gens-là qui vont nous bloquer. Maintenant,
Look at her smile.
Yeah.
She's loving this.
To my knowledge, most of the unvaccinated, I mean, this seems to be a rule across the global north in general, are actually ethnic minorities who are naturally kind of, shall we say, not particularly trusting of authority. Mm-hmm. So he's just called them all racists and misogynists.
And extremists.
And extremists.
And she was loving it. Do we tolerate these people? As in Marcuse's, do we withdraw tolerance from them? Well, do we tolerate the Jews in Germany? I guess we don't. It's absolutely mad. And so, I mean, thank God there's still some politicians in Canada with some sense. You had Maxime Bernier, who came out and was like, you're a fascist psychopath. It's like, yes, you absolutely are a fascist psychopath. Like this is wild. But anyway, moving on, this is being indoctrinated into children. This is just awful. This is just, let's watch.
Au vaccin, vous autres?
Oui, tous les deux, on a une seule dose.
Ah oui? Puis est-ce que vous êtes d'accord, vous autres, avec la vaccination obligatoire?
Oui.
Oui? Oh. Ah oui, hein?
Wow. On dirait que je les ai drillés, Julie.
Oui. Puis qu'est-ce qu'on devrait faire avec les gens qui veulent pas se faire vacciner?
On devrait appeler la police.
Ouh,
Oui.
oui, oui.
Wow.
S'ils n'ont pas leur vaccin, ça peut mettre beaucoup de personnes en danger. Fait que comme le gouvernement est en train de faire en ce moment, il faut leur couper petite chose à petite jusqu'à temps qu'ils se donnent puis qu'ils se fassent vacciner.
En tout cas, on a des futurs politiciens à côté de nous. Merci. Merci beaucoup à tous nos invités.
Let me hope not.
That's the Hitler Youth right there.
Yeah.
That's evil. That's just outright evil. And they're all just cheering, clapping, laughing. We should take everything from them. Why should you? Because they're Jewish. That's why. Honestly, it's absolutely terrifying.
If you enjoyed that segment from the podcast, The Lotus Eaters, you can go over to lotuseaters.com to subscribe to get access to all the premium content we have on the site, such as this video, which is Contemplations, that went up over the weekend about why the mainstream media are terrible and are bad for you. But if you'd like to keep up with what else is coming out on the website, you can always follow us on Getter. So you could go, for example, to see more from Josh at Josh's Getter account here at Josh_firm. Thank you and goodbye.